Good evening, everyone.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Sorry we're a little late. The internet connection is a little iffy tonight. We're keeping our fingers crossed. We absolutely cannot figure out why. But here we go. So this is number 98. We're getting ever closer to 100. We have Ann Cooper on next week, the first show of the new year. And then Reverend Michael Carter will be with us for our 100th, and we'll be talking about our contactee experiences. I'll be talking about his book Initiation, which is a handbook for experiencers. So let's just roll the credits. We have so much to go over tonight. One of our most beloved subjects, Mothman.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon, the preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, the couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
Okay, and welcome back. Let's look at the comments here. Hi, Julie. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Julie.
Brian.
Lori.
Brian, thanks for joining us. Hello,
Hi,
Michael. 2 of our 6 contributors are with us tonight. That's something new that we're doing for 2021. We talked about, we introduced a third one, Craig Ansel, and we have 3 more, which we'll be announcing the 4th on Monday, and then a week from Monday, 2 at once. So we're excited. We'll have more roundtables, more group discussions, a lot more conversations, and we're getting away from interviewing guest Q&A kind of thing. So tonight, we're talking about a subject so near and dear to our hearts. We watched Mothman Prophecies, the film, for probably, the 30th time the other night.
At least.
Yeah, I would say in preparation for the show. And we're always finding out new things. We're going to share some things with you tonight that I found that I had no idea. So we're doing page to screen comparison. Now, I'm very excited about this because I adapt stories to Mario. I'm glad you made it.
Hi, Mario.
I'm so excited about this episode, which I just love. Makes you feel good, and I don't think we're going to disappoint you at all, Mario, because I do adaptations from books to screenplays, from books to plays. I'm in the middle of a couple now, and so I kind of understand the process. We'll share with you guys at all. So if you haven't read the Mothman Prophecies book by John Keel, if you haven't seen the film, it's okay. I think this is still going to be entertaining.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
And we have lots of images for you through this new feature that StreamYard has, PowerPoints.
If you haven't seen the movie, I think this will pique your interest and you will want to.
And read the book as well. Yeah. So we're going to go small. I know some people were, but I just feel if we do it equal, that doesn't work.
No, these images are going to be way more interesting than we are.
So the title of tonight's presentation is Mothman Prophecies Page to Stage Comparison. So let's just jump in to the nuts and bolts, and then I think it just gets more interesting as it goes. But so the book, Mothman Prophecies, this came out in 1975. Keel, of course, was in Point Pleasant from 66 to 67.
Mhm.
So what happened in those 8 years? Well, first he realized, hey, there's the Balkans. He had so much material, so many reports were coming in. The scope of it was so big, but then it took him a really long time to get a publisher. But
Mhm.
before we tell you about that, this is, I believe, one of the early covers.
Yeah.
And if you notice, this is a Frank Franzetta painting, which is absolutely just gorgeous. Although these
stunning.
people are running away in absolute fright, which, that was part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But the famous Bob Roach statue debuted in 2002. I think that was the second festival. The movie had just come out. Looks quite similar, actually, which is very, very cool. I did not know that was the inspiration,
Yeah,
the
I didn't
painting.
know that either, but that totally makes sense.
There's a cam outside the Mothman Museum with a
Mothman.
live feed, and I can't imagine the tens of thousands of people, or maybe more, who have touched, posed with this statue. I mean, it's really amazing. Good evening, Charles.
Hi, Charles.
Fellow traveler from Earth Radio.
Yes, I will say on the camera note, we, when we're there for the weekend, for the entire weekend that we are there, that statue is always busy. I mean, it's just like group after group, couple after couple, person after person, posing with Mothman.
Till like 2-3 in the morning.
Oh, constant. Like when we stay at the Low Hotel, we'll hear people down on the street at the statue. And I always get a kick out of it. I just think it's awesome.
So again, before we move on, that was the inspiration. And here's the man himself. Now, I chose this picture. This is not a typical picture of Keel. No. When he was older, he had the mustache. Through most of his investigatory career, he was clean shaven. We're going to reveal pretty soon why I picked this picture. Also, hopefully in a couple of years, I'm going to be doing an educational walking tour as the man, and this is most likely what I'm going to look like. I think it will work.
I can see that. I can see it.
Yeah, it really got me thinking and kind of excited when I saw this. So, like I said, he had a really hard time getting a publisher for this book about the paranormal. Paranormal was not mainstream.
Right.
He was called a Fortean. Charles Fort told these sort of fantastical stories that he had collected, and they sort of had a tongue-in-cheek sort of spin on them. So then he rewrites the opening chapter, which is called Beelzebub in Virginia, right? You just read it last night.
Beelzebub.
From Michael.
Yeah, for those of you who've seen the movie Michael know what
John Travolta.
What I'm referencing there.
Beelzebub. So Beelzebub in West Virginia, the devil in West Virginia. So that is, already right there. We're going to talk about the chapter more, but he really does make West Virginia down very backwards.
He does, and that's unfortunate because it's not exactly the way he paints it in the opening of the
he says driving through that area was like a B horror movie from the 1930s. Not at all kind.
And he also says, like, he describes the homes like almost like shacks. The way he I don't see it, but maybe he was going for, I don't know.
Well, he was going for Beelzebub in West Virginia, which we'll talk about a little more. Lori, thank you so much. That'll be great. I will go to you. You will be a VIP guest, my friend. Okay, so the movie. Okay, so the book is in 1975. It's pretty darn successful. It's translated into 13 languages. And Keel is trying to get a movie made because that's where the dollars are. And he's a working journalist, struggling to get by all the time. There were times that he was almost broke when he was investigating the Mothman. He stayed with witnesses' families, and they put him up and they fed him and all that kind of stuff. But the right movie wasn't coming along. So at some point in the process, Richard Gere got involved. There was something about the character of John Keel that he was very interested in, and he had a producing partner. And they were turning down script after script because they didn't want to make a monster movie. And that is I'm writing this play for American Lore Theater about Mothman, and not making him a monster, but showing him is there's a trick to it. We're talking about all kinds of interesting things. So anyway, so the movie. So how does the movie get made? The screenwriter is called Richard Hatem, and he finds Mothman Prophecies book in a used bookstore in 1997. He sits up all night in the bookstore. He must have known the owner or something like that, and gets a hold of Keel the next day. And he says that he wants to write a screenplay of this book, and he wants it to be about questions we will never be able to answer or understand, which, you know, for you and I and the work that we do and our contributors, I find that disappointing. Someday we will understand all this, but it was 2002. Quantum physics wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now. Keel is 72 years old, and he says that the Mothman phenomena was nothing humans could understand, and it was about things that we will never know. Also very cynical.
I mean, it could be the case, and we're going to get to that part, so I'm not going to say it, but
Mhm.
I'll say it when we get to that part, because I know you know what I'm going to say.
Right. So enter the director, whose name is Mark Pellington. Now, as many directors do, and I've done it with my small budget short films, he put himself in the movie. So you'll see there's a scene where Klein has had Richard Gere's character Klein, based on Keel, has had a real blow. He's at his low point in story terms. He's losing terribly. It's the dark night of the soul, and he's the bartender who brings him a drink.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very quick thing. So it's one of those things you probably don't take note of. But yeah, we never knew that was we probably never even noticed the bartender.
So, and Mark Pellington isn't famous like Spielberg or Martin Scorsese or one of those guys. I do want to point out, though, that he did write Arlington Road. It's a 1999 movie with Jeff Bridges and Tim Robbins. And it is an excellent movie. It's also about appearances versus truth, dealing with hard truths. So if you like Mothman Prophecies, check out Arlington Road. Different vibe, not as artsy as or surreal. So anyway, after the fact, so it was always promoted as based on a true story. It got some pushback, and we're going to unpack that tonight as we go. And he said in an interview, Pellington, that he should have said inspired by a true story, which I really love that. Inspired by, based on true events. Right. All those different things. Because I've written several screenplays and stage works based on a true story. And you can't always be faithful, and this movie certainly isn't. So what you have, folks, is you have iterations of modified truth for entertainment purposes, which we'll also see as we go. Well, I know a little bit about this stuff.
You do know a little bit about this stuff.
So, like I said, Richard Gere, he was involved in the project from early on. And why did I put this here? There's a reason. Okay, so we're going to take this. I'm just getting a little ahead of it, so don't worry about that. But anyway, Gere gets involved. He wants a movie about processing unbelievable events, like, for instance, the sudden death of a spouse. How do we process things that we're not able to process?
And I just want to add here, going back to what you said about how they didn't want to make a monster movie, and I'm so glad. I am so very glad that the movie, the major motion picture that was made based on the book, was not about being a monster movie, because I don't think anything that has to do with that whole 11 12 months was about that.
So Pellington said that what it wound up being about was the psychology of belief. So I was thinking about this today when I was putting the PowerPoint together and refining the outline and all. When Rosemary passed away, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, that was about the psychology of belief. We didn't grieve her the way we would have, the way we have other mentors and close family members and all when they passed, because we were still in contact with her.
Right.
And she's since gone on to the really, really outer realms, and no one's really hearing from her anymore. And so the grieving process came. So that psychology of belief, processing when an unexpected illness takes someone too soon. So, but Keel, Beelzebub in West Virginia, and we're gonna get to that. So enter Richard Gere, and he plays John Klein. Now notice John Keel, John Klein. He plays a Washington Post reporter, which is kind of nice. Keel was a journalist for a really long time in New York City, but he never achieved the level of the Washington Post.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice thing. He gets a little, an up level, as we say. The movie was made in 2002 for $42 million. That was about the half of the big blockbusters, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. But there were other movies that were in the top 10 grossing movies that were made for considerably less. So it was sort of like a middling budget, which was not bad. And Pellington wasn't really established. So that wasn't too bad there. So Klein is the outsider. He comes to this very foreign place, so it's stranger in a strange land, right? There's only two kinds of stories: boy meets girl, stranger in a strange land. So he's a stranger in strange land. We'll talk about how he gets there. He's an outsider, but he's also a researcher, an investigator. So what do we need? We need an experiencer. So enter the other half, the analog, the split off of John Keel in the form of Alexander Leake. Leake, Keel spelled backwards. Encodement, but you don't have to work too hard. Now, he is the experiencer. And as we go, we'll see that he speaks words directly from the book.
I was just revisiting the book, and I was like, oh, wow, this was exact from the movie.
Yeah, so he says a lot of stuff. So you have these two split offs. Well, where else in famous paranormal work do we have a pair that's the experiencer and the sort of clinical investigator? Mulder and Scully from the X-Files, who we talk about on this show now and again. So that's a device there. Which is really kind of nice. So you need that. As the investigator is taking their journey toward experiencer, they need that. I know when we had our experience in 2009, which we'll be talking about off and on tonight, I needed to go to the books. I needed to go to the literature. I needed to go to John Keel and people like that. So Alexander Leake is a former Cornell physics professor and a paranormal author. Boom. That is very much like Keel, because Keel wrote about things that he called the super spectrum. What we couldn't see, we can see such a tiny amount. It's less than 1% on the visible spectrum. That we can even see. Most things we can't see. So how do we know? We've done episodes on that about Tesla and parallel dimensions and all that kind of stuff. Leake says, which are words almost exactly right out of Keel's mouth, these things are a natural condition of the planet. Keel believed that. Keel believed that they were here forever, that they were tricksters. He called them ultra-terrestrials. So he was getting away from the ET theory, nuts and bolts flying saucers, and saying, no, this is about energy, parallel dimensions. They're tricksters. And I happen to believe, ironically, he backed off on a lot of those things that a lot of us have kind of pursued and sort of our threads. He said, it's more of a literary device, and I don't mean they actually, lived or anything like that. They really existed, and we're making the phenomena. Yeah,
he may have, because again, revisiting the Mothman Prophecies the other night, he even says, when human beings have completely, gone extinct because we've polluted all of our water and polluted all of our air, and then the humans are gone, these ultra-terrestrials are going to be bored because they're not going to have anybody to mess with. So I thought that was kind of interesting and probably true.
In the book I'm working on, Parallels and Patterns, there's 2 chapters on the trickster, because the trickster phenomena is very, very real. It really complicates all of this. So famous line from the film that we kind of adopted. You want to?
Yes. So he says, you notice them and they notice that you notice them. And we have, that is so true. We have noticed that with all of the phenomenon, with lights in the sky, with haunting phenomenon, contactee phenomenon. Once you notice it, once you start paying attention to it and feeding it your energy, it notices you back.
Right. And you attune to it. You get more capable. You're a wonderful teacher. So that's a really big part of it. And I've done a lot of exercises and all that. But to see ghosts and spirits now, to hear them, we have a very, very rambunctious little boy who I can hear him coming up the stairs. He laughed at the foot of the bed the other night. In the middle of the night, I woke up and he was laughing.
That he keeps closing my office door too,
Yeah.
which kind of freaks me out because when I come out like in the middle of the night to get a drink of water or whatever, and I'm just used to my door, which is right across the hall, being open, and when it's closed, it's just very startling because it's like, wait a minute, no, that shouldn't be closed.
Yeah, he's been Michael came to visit us before Christmas, Michael Giannetti, and he really likes to show off and make himself known in front of Michael.
He's been quite active.
Yeah, which is wonderful. We love it. So, hey, Craig, there's another one of our contributors. So all three announced contributors are with us tonight. That is great. So the other thing, what I have here on the screen, we're not allowed to know, and he gets very sinister, right? Alan Bates is wonderful. They went through 6 or 7 actors before they decided on Alan Bates, and he's great. He is really great.
Perfect.
And so Keel gets Klein gets very, very frustrated at the end of the second act of the film. He's in the dark night of the soul, and he says, "Don't you want to know what these things are?" And Leek looks at him just like that's right from our TV last night, and he says, "We're not allowed to know." Mm-hmm. And I do think that there are forces that are very much like that.
That's what I was referencing earlier when I said we'd get to it. When you thought Keel was being maybe a little cynical that these are things we'll never know, it's possible that in this particular experience that we're having of the physical 3-dimensional reality, while we're in this 3-dimensional experience, we are not allowed to know. And I've been giving a lot more thought lately to this theory that we're actually living in a simulation, and what would that mean, and what are the sort of higher implications of that. And yeah, if you are, I think you're probably not supposed to know that you're in a simulation, and you're not supposed to know what's going on behind the curtain,
right?
Basically.
And last time when Solaris Blue Raven was a guest on the show 3 weeks or so ago, I was talking about that dissonance field that's sometimes there. Mm-hmm. It's like you just can't see what's beyond it. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed. So, Lori says, reminds me of Ingo Swann. They notice that you notice him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he worked closely with a quantum physicist, Hal Puthoff, but also a level of spirituality there. And I think that's very much it. That's what sent us on our whole thing in 2009. We noticed them. And so they tested us, which we found under regression hypnosis. So another character that's very important. This character is pure fabrication. Mm-hmm. Deborah Messing is Mary. She does a wonderful job. She's only in it for the first act and then little flashbacks and things like that. She is named, though, for a real person. She is the catalyst. She is the one who puts him on his journey. Has him answer the call of adventure, literally, as we're going to talk about, is in terms of the hero's journey, because she gets sick. She sees the Mothman. She gets sick, and she dies unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And they're young. They're probably in their late 40s, I would guess, or mid 40s, about to buy a house, all that kind of stuff. And Gere's character says, "You're just going along." And the universe says, "Oh, it's you, the happy couple. I've been looking for you." Which is very sinister and chilling, because it does feel that way sometimes.
I was going to say, in that moment, I'm sure that's how it feels.
So Mary is based on a real person, Mary Hire. Mary Hire figures we're doing, I don't think this is really giving anything away, but Mary Hire's office, we're recreating it. Mm-hmm.
So cool.
And in a base sort of way, because of course it's an escape room, but that's the first room of the escape room. So Mary Hire, where the waters mingle, where the Kanawha and the Ohio come together, what the Wyandotte called To Windy Way, the coming together of the waters. And she worked for, you'll see up there, in the header, she worked for the Athens Messenger in Ohio, but she had an office in Point Pleasant. She was like the local correspondent. And we have sat outside, gotten very interesting communications, not from Mary, but very interesting communications through Spirit Box and all, outside of where her office used to be. Stuff about Men in Black and all that she had a lot of experience with. So she wrote that. Now, that's not where the similarities end. Mary died, it was February 15th of 1970. She died unexpectedly of a heart attack. And some people do kind of feel there's, the Mothman curse or whatnot. There are stronger names for it, and I'm not even going to give it any publicity of people tracking things. But anyway, so Mary dies unexpectedly. It shakes up Keel. It shakes up a lot of people, and so that is the homage. That's the one-to-one there. But again, the death served as a catalyst for him to go on his journey. So the unexpected death, processing the incomprehensible. She sees this thing. She draws pictures of it. We're going to show you some of those pictures later. You can also see them, the actual sketches in the Mothman Museum. We'll talk about that too. But Klein will do anything to get answers. He's a journalist. He's pragmatic. He's analytical. And this thing happens that he does not understand. And so he'll pursue the paranormal to find the answers. So fairly typical theme. Okay, so here we go. So another character that is also based on Mary Hyre. Very interesting. It's another split off kind of thing here. So played by the very, very talented and pretty good looking Laura Linney. But just an astonishing, wonderful actress. And she is the insider. So she can't be a reporter because Klein is a reporter. So what do you make her? Who's an insider that would take reports and all? She's a sergeant for the police. A very, very smart choice on the part of the screen writer. So where did she get her name? Connie. Connie was Connie Carpenter, who was Mary Hyre's niece. Now, interestingly, we did a show just a couple weeks ago about the history of Mothman. Connie not only saw Mothman in 66, but in February of 67, a mysterious man tried to abduct her.
Yes, and it really traumatized her.
Yes, absolutely. And when she got home that day, there was a note, and it said, "I can get you yet." Very kind of Men in Black, kind of creepy. Are people talking too much? Are they trying to get through Mary Hyre? We don't know. I find it very interesting that it's only a week's difference, that it would be 3 years to the day that Mary died after Connie's abduction. And I don't want to read too much into that, but again, she dies of a heart attack February 15th, 1970. The attempted abduction was February 22nd, 1967. Just want to point that out. So there's a little bit of a romantic thing, right? When we're making movies and you're trying to get them funded, you want to check as many boxes as possible. And so the romance thing, but they don't lay on it because he's still grieving Mary so hard till the bitter end. So they never kiss or anything like that. But they grow more into it in this. And again, she's the insider. She's got personal knowledge of the reports, relationship with the witnesses. It's very clean. She tells them, look, these people are telling me these things, and a lot of them seem downright embarrassed. And she says, it's not the local speed freak. I have the movie memorized. It's not the local speed freak, but these are good church-going folks. Because a lot of people said, oh, the kids who reported them were on drugs or they were drunk. They were neither.
And that really breaks my heart because these were upstanding members of the community. These were not the local drunks, the local drug, none of that. And so many of the people who, were brave enough to report what they saw, regretted it for the rest of their life because they were ostracized and their lives, many of them were ruined. So it breaks my heart.
Broken marriages, people left town, they became recluses, they were laughed at. And even, interviews that I was reading from like Los Angeles Times and Variety Magazine and Entertainment Weekly, big magazines did stories on this movie when it came out. And there were comments passed about, oh, they were just drinking bad hooch, in Hicksville, West Virginia.
It's
So
disrespectful.
with the escape room, with the play, with the first play that I did, that we did a stage reading of, that I'm now turning into short stories, fictionalized short stories. We're trying to honor these people because a lot of damage is done.
Yeah. It's absolutely disrespectful. It's cruel.
Mm-hmm.
To just make assumptions because you don't want to believe what somebody else experienced. And I've always said to try to assume or presume that you know what somebody else has experienced is just the ultimate in
Right.
disrespect.
Right.
So I'll get off my little soapbox.
No, no, it's a very salient point when you're talking about this stuff. We have been very lucky when we went public with our experience.
Mm-hmm.
We've been very, very fortunate because, I don't know, 10 years ago, people might not have been as ready for it as they have been now, And I think we had credibility, whatever, but I was very, very nervous. So, okay, let's keep going. So then they talk to the witnesses. The actors who play the witnesses are some of the best actors in the film. And I think Pellington knew we need actors who can bring the credibility,
mm-hmm.
who can bring the fear, who can go back in time. And this actress was just spectacular.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And then there's another actor. So they're amalgams of Marcella Bennett, Faye DeWitt, the Mallets, the Scarberrys. Here are these young people. They were each married. They were still in their late teens. The guys worked. I think maybe the girls were finishing school. They went to the sheriff. They did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were just out for a cruise on 62 when this happened. Not unlike us.
Yeah.
They didn't ask for what happened.
To be
they didn't
go
at
100 miles an hour.
Keep in mind, Tanya and I were not investigators at the time. Mm-mm. We just went because we were curious.
We had seen the movie and we were like, hey, let's go check out Point.
And I don't even think I had read the book yet.
I
think I read it after our experience.
Remember, I might have read it right before we went, but I really couldn't tell you. I'd have to look at my journals.
Yeah, because when it said like based on a true story, I was like, what the heck is a Mothman? So I was thinking about it today. When we say we know what the Scarberrys and Mallets were feeling, except they saw this thing and they remembered it. So let me correct. That's a whole nother level.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Ours was regression hypnosis.
Yeah,
so really no comparison.
We don't. No comparison because it chased them all the way back from the TNT. Nothing chased us like that.
Right, 100 miles an hour.
100 miles an hour. So no, we have no idea what that feels like.
Yep. So again, stranger in a strange land. She is, I'll just go back to her here real quick. She's the skeptic, which they need that. And when he's really starting to drink the Kool-Aid and go down the rabbit hole, she's like, what are you doing? You can't be doing this. And I can't call out sick from work and all of this. And so as he's becoming the true believer, she's his true north.
Right.
Because he's a line. We're going to talk about the next character very soon. It all kind of logically follows because it's a beautifully written screenplay. Really so these things happen. So then you have the Mallets and the Scarberrys. First of all, Will Patton is phenomenal.
He brings it.
He went to Point Pleasant. He stayed at the Low Hotel. He got to know the town. I don't know that Gere and Lenny and all the rest didn't go to the town,
right?
But there's proof that still hangs right by the elevator in the Low Hotel of Will Patton being there. That's the kind of, he's in my top 10 all time.
He's so good.
Boy, he brings it. And so he plays a character called Gordon Smallwood. But one more thing I want to say. We're trying to move quick. The time's going so fast. We got a lot of ground to cover. Still a lot of pictures to get through. Keel went to Point Pleasant to do an article for Playboy. He had convinced them to do an article on UFOs, which is interesting because there wasn't a whole heck of a lot. In the mid-Ohio Valley, there kind of was. But he lands in Point Pleasant and he sees UFOs.
No, there was a UFO flap happening along the Ohio River at that time.
Right.
Which is probably why he went there.
Yeah.
Because there was, in correlation with the sightings, there was a big UFO flap.
Yeah. Although not that many documented UFOs prior to the initial sightings of Mothman, when you look on the timeline.
Right.
But he and Mary saw a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, you can't have Klein doing that because then he can't be the skeptic and the political commentator, investigator who then gets sucked into a story trying to pursue the truth. So that's why they did that. Just want to say that. So, Gordon, he's also an amalgam of two people. And I didn't know this. I just thought he was basically Woody Derenberger, this fellow here, who we're going to talk about in a little. But in the interviews, and Pellington does not out the other person he was based on, but he says Woodrow Derenberger, who saw Injured Cold.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that. But also someone who was a highly traumatized witness to Mothman. So we're guessing probably Linda Scarberry. Because there's a little bit of telepathy and all of that kind of thing. But Gordon sort of, he does heavy lifting for a lot of the things that were spread out in the book. And again, Will Patton is just so into it. He's a true believer. He's had these experiences. He has this weird thing with Klein, which we're going to get to in a minute. And he allies with John Klein in a different way, which is important.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, as through the true believer rabbit hole, and they sort of reinforce each other, and they're like a couple guys on a big adventure. And so again, we get to this Beelzebub in West Virginia, and I don't want to go all the way back to that Keel photo, but what happens in the movie is Klein is going to Virginia to interview a political candidate, a guy. He's the governor of Virginia, and he's running for president, or he's going to run for president. So he's driving all night, and he turns up on this desolate road, and his car dies. He's got a pretty nice car, BMW, Audi, something like that. The car just dies. He goes to this house, and he knocks on the door, and Gordon Smallwood, Will Patton, comes to the door, and he says, "Can I use your phone?" Now, in Beelzebub in West Virginia, it's the middle of the night. Keel's car goes off the road into the mud. We know what that's like in West Virginia when you're a newbie. He's dressed all in black. He's got that black beard, and he's over 6 foot tall. And he shows up at somebody's house. "Can I use your phone?"
In the 1960s, when people didn't have beards. You just didn't.
Which was astonishing to me. I'm sure like the mountain men and all, but I guess, good church going folk.
Yeah, unless you were like a professor or
a hippie, a yippie.
A hippie. I don't even think, maybe hippies were. Yeah,
oh, sure. In 67, 68. Yeah, I think a beard. That's what it meant.
Professor.
Yeah, so he was the outsider, the quintessential outsider. He shows up and all this crazy stuff starts to happen. Now, it was already in motion. He shows up about a week after the Mallets and Scarberries, Faye DeWitt, Marcella Bennett. But yet he's perceived as Beelzebub in West Virginia. He's perceived as the harbinger of doom with "May I use your phone?" So Gordon brings him in. He traps him in his shower. This is when we first meet Connie. She's in her sergeant garb there. The idea of the outsider is... well, it's not only fundamental to the Mothman story and the Point Pleasant story, but to West Virginia. And we've talked about that separately together. It was hard. It was hard to be the outsider and try to get things done, sit on boards, have the theater company, all that kind of stuff. It's an isolated area. The traditions are very long. And the perception is that fancy people come in from out of town, rape the land, use the people, steal their information, and go off and leave them high and dry, and oftentimes make them look foolish. So is that what Keel was doing? That was the perception there. So insider outsiders all through. I read several academic papers about the Mothman Prophecies. So one of the criticisms of Keel and his approach is, and as you're rereading it, I'll be curious to see your thoughts. He de-emphasizes the witnesses and their testimony so that he can be the interpreter, the authority, the expert.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that evolved for him, having not, you know, ever got to meet him. But it definitely comes across that way in the Mothman
Right.
Prophecies. Is like, yeah, I know exactly what this, like, he will make these determinations. And I think more and more today, really good investigators, people like Rosemary and a lot of people that we read and follow,
Hopefully us.
and us, we don't come to any definite conclusions about anything. It's just like, here are the facts. And yeah, that would have been nice to see more in the book. Just here are the
Right.
facts about what happened. Who knows what it means?
But keep in mind, the book comes out in 75, late 60s to early 70s. You got Hunter S. Thompson, Gonzo journalism, the new journalism. The journalist is a character. There's no more of this, okay, I'm reporting only facts and I'm not part of the story. I'm just in the byline. No, I am the story. So everything is through my filter and all. So we need to contextualize
that. Is very much the case. And I do appreciate that part of it when Keel talks about his own experiences with the really weird phone calls
Right.
and just all the bizarre things that happen. So I really do like that part of the book.
Yeah, and I want to say, in fairness, I've read all the letters because Jeff Wamsley's books have facsimiles of all the letters. He was very gracious with the families, but he also got very paranoid, and he's warning them, and don't pick up things that are kind of like sticky or metallic, and they're watching us everywhere. It's very interesting to read those letters. He got very sucked into the rabbit hole.
Well, considering a lot of the strange phenomenon that was going on, I mean, I could see, I think I might begin to feel that way
Right.
too. You have all this really bizarre stuff happening to you all the time, and these bizarre men in black showing up and threatening people that you care about. So I could see that.
Yeah. So Gordon and Klein move from allies, from enemies to, or let's say adversaries to allies. It becomes really, really important. I love this picture. It's a great moment. Gordon confides in him about premonitions and all. So that's the next segment of this. Premonitions and the mystery of Indrid Cold. John Keel had premonitions. Keel got info regarding the MLK and RFK assassinations, which happened a year after the height of all of this. He saw bad ends for Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, which was a little bit after. And he also got pretty detailed information on the attempted assassination of the Pope. So again, when Leake says, I was getting premonitions, I was almost arrested, I lost my job, my family left me, this is the big trickster element. I'm struggling with this as I try to develop the play and all. And we try and figure out what was Mothman and what was his relationship to the bridge. Why did he show up at that time? Why did Indrid Cold come? Indrid Cold comes, he says nothing about the bridge. He has all these conversations with Woody Derenberger, never mentions the bridge, this interstellar traveler. So there's the trickster, there's the watcher, there's the harbinger. A harbinger is not a protector or a preventer.
Right.
It's simply a harbinger, and we're going to talk about that in the lore. So Gordon gets these premonitions. He's the one who sort of carries this forward in part, about a plane crash, about a disaster near the equator. Both of them come true, and he doesn't have enough time to do anything about it. Now, Rosemary wrote a wonderful book about dreams, premonitions, and people often, before 9/11, so many people had dreams of disasters. I've read that a lot of people dreamed about the bridge and didn't have the context to interpret it. 9/11, random number generators all of a sudden got non-random. These things happen. These signals go out, and we just have to be in tune to interpret them. But then depending on when they come and what the information is, right? Doesn't that become the huge question? Why tell me if I can't do anything about it?
Yeah.
That's one of the questions that we're not allowed.
And who knows what the motivations are. And Leake says that.
Right. Their motivations
They're
not human.
Motivations are not human. So
that's sinister.
Again, like if you think about if we are living in some big simulation, or like I think of it like a video game. It's the closest analogy I can come up with.
Yeah.
And like that's the kind of stuff that happens in video games. Right. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
So we're gonna get
on this thread for a while.
Let's get with Gordon and with Woody and continue with this. So on November 2nd, so this is almost 2 weeks to the day before the Mallets and Scarberries have the big sighting that kicks all this off. He's driving home. He's going to Marietta from where he works. He's I think a sewing machine salesman or something. I read today, although I hadn't seen this other places, he pulls over his truck on the side of the road to adjust a sewing machine in the back of his car.
I never read that.
Or his truck. I just read that today. So of course there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
But somehow he stops, and this thing that looks like a stovepipe comes down on the road. Keel says that a woman and her children saw it several hours later, also in the area, and other people did come forward. When Woody came forward, this is him doing a press conference, and Susan Shepard, who passed away tragically of cancer early this year, I think April, she had the tapes, the original tapes of Woody's interview, but you can hear it recorded online. It's around. This being called Injured Cold. Interesting name. Like
it is.
Thor, Valiant Thor, and all these Carl Ardo, these space travelers, they have interesting names. I've incorporated some of that into the escape room because it's an interesting phenomenon.
I almost like to take and see if it's like some sort of anagram or something.
It might be.
Those letters.
It might be, and then So Mark Pellington, the director, was also the voice of Injured Cold in all these series of phone calls. Which was also very interesting. He does a wonderful job. Hello, John Keel. Which we're gonna come to that. So Injured tells him, don't be afraid. We're not here to harm you. He's speaking to him telepathically. He has a really, really nice tan. He looks kind of Italian. His hair is slicked back. Speaking telepathically, and he looks off to Parkersburg in the distance, medium-sized city. And he says, we call those gatherings, where I'm from, which turned out to be called Lanulos. But he doesn't say anything about the bridge. Doesn't mention Mothman, nothing like that, anything. So this becomes an interesting theme in the movie. John Klein starts getting phone calls, and he says, what do you look like? To which Injured Cold says,
it depends on who's looking.
Right, which we know that why do our spiritual guides, our spirit guides, come to us in the guise of Native Americans when we're studying Native Americanism, or Mary. Some people, Catholics, see Mary in these famous sightings. Everybody else sees a UFO. Depends on who's looking, so the information can get in. It's the opposite end of screeners.
It is, and I just want to say, like when I'm doing mediumship readings, the thing is you're the receiver of the signal of the information, the signal line, the information that's coming in, and Ingo Swann called it your reality box, but you have a frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like when they talk about when Columbus came with the ships and the indigenous people couldn't see them because they had no frame of reference, so they couldn't even conceptual, like they couldn't even see them. There was no frame of reference, so they can only work with the frame of reference that you have. So they're going to pick the closest thing. And when I'm doing mediumship readings, it's very much the same thing. They'll show me something that is coming from my frame of reference, so it may not be the exact or the identical thing that's going to make sense for the person I'm doing the reading for, but that's the only way that they have to make it make sense to me.
Right. So it depends on who's looking. Okay, so this is a fairly popular sketch of Injured Cold. Then he manifests as something called the Grinning Man because supposedly he was smiling. That's what Gere said. He has his hands under his armpits and he's just smiling the whole time, smiling. But maybe he was trying to be disarming.
But I'm going to do some more research on this sinister.
Well, it's a phenomenon called the Grinning Man.
No, I know. I've heard of it, but I've had dreams of this character, and I've never really pursued the research on it, but now I think I'm going to.
So in the film, they used an actor. His name was Bill something. All practical effects, no special effects, just filmed out of focus. So Inger is there, and I find this very interesting. Here's John Klein outside the power plant. He started to have premonitions, a great tragedy on the Ohio. Is it the power plant? Again, unclear premonitions, and there's a little bit of that shape, which I thought was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Pellington put his voice, Injured told, you really can't hear it, and we have a pretty good sound bar on our television. You can't hear it, but he interlays his voice to give us the idea that maybe it's all in John Klein's head.
Mhm.
But then it's also in Woody's head.
Mhm.
So I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to watch the movie and see if maybe Connie isn't real and Woody isn't real? But they are. I know enough about this. I could tell. So that was very interesting. Okay, so the phone calls. Hello, John Klein. One last thing about Ingo's injured cult. He says, and he says it twice in the movie, I'll see you in time.
Mhm.
Gordon says it, but then he also says it. That was not from Woodrow Derenberger.
Mhm.
And we talked about this. So guys, just because of time, go back and watch the episode where we talk about Lori joined us, Emily joined us. And it was this guy, Tom Montalone, who was trying to punk Keel. He was a psychology student at the University of Maryland. He calls into this show where Woodrow Derenberger is talking about injured cult. He's like, yeah, man, I've been to Landley. I know him. He told me I'll see you in time. And it's one of those things that's been adopted, even though it was a phony.
Mhm.
I find that that's the trickster.
Mhm.
That's the trickster element. The thing that sticks is the made up thing,
Mhm.
not the real thing. So Cole begins to call Klein as he's beginning to go down the rabbit hole. He's getting more and more desperate for answers. He's dreaming of Mary. He's seeing her. Other people are seeing her. There's a moment where Klein is testing him. And he takes his watch, he drops it in his shoe, and he puts it under the bed. And he says, where's my watch? And he says, in the shoe, under the bed. A real thing happened to John Keel when he was getting this information through phone calls. He had lost a stopwatch. And he said, look, if you're from the other side, where's my stopwatch? And the voice knew where it was.
Mhm.
Very interesting. So that's a very cool homage there. Keel got a lot of mysterious calls. He learned the wiring and the circuitry. He called Bell Atlantic all the time. He would get these hellacious phone bills with calls he didn't make. He went down to the wiring. He talked to the FBI. Now, some of that we have since found out that Gray Barker hoaxed him.
Mhm.
Would have too much to drink. Him and another buddy of his would have too much to drink, and they would call him. But it doesn't count for all of them.
Mhm.
Other people were getting weird calls. Anytime anybody tried to record them, they were static.
There was also packages, mail that he had sent that would get intercepted, and there's no explanation for how that couldn't have been Gray Barker.
And we personally know investigators, and then another investigator wrote about it in their book of the same thing. You send somebody something or email files, stuff never shows up, disappears off the hard drive, the package comes and it's empty.
Mhm.
Very, very interesting kind of things. Things also happened with radios and TVs. When you're talking about the super spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, holographic universe, electromagnetic frequency, of course, TVs, radios, telephones are great conductivity pieces. So in Salem, not far, a guy named Merle Partridge, his dog was possibly taken by Mothman, but his TV was acting absolutely crazy while the dog abduction was happening. So Mary Hyre also had premonitions. She was one of the people who had premonitions about the bridge. Now, this is interesting. November 19th, 1967. This is 4 days after the Scarberry Mallet sightings. Keel just lands in town, and Mary Keel says to him, I had a terrible nightmare. There are a lot of people drowning in the river, and Christmas packages were floating everywhere in the water. It's like something awful is going to happen. That was 13 months out.
Oh, yeah. You said 67. It had to be 66.
It was 66. I'm sorry. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, 67. I'm right. So it was a month out. It was less than a month out, which makes more sense. Keel wasn't even in town until somewhere around the 21st, 22nd, 23rd.
Oh, okay.
So no, that's right. It was November 19th, 1967. So just shy, 4 days shy of a month out.
Wow.
So, and of course, there's the thing where Connie tells him, had this dream, and they added the wake up number 37, which we'll talk about a little later. So let's talk about the portrayal of the Mothman. So that's a big question. What was Mothman? First possibility, which is a pretty good one, is the Thunderbird.
Mhm.
Thunderbird appears in Iroquois, Tuscarora, Wyandot. They call them the flying heads. They call them the big heads, the creatures with the big eyes, all of which the no-neck sort of big-eyed Mothman falls under that, winged and all of that. Here's another one, the Garuda, Buddhist, Hindu. Thunderbird, and Thunderbird, of course, brings the thunder. Thunder is very, very powerful. If you hear thunder during a certain time, sweat lodge or whatever, you become a heyoka. You become a trickster yourself. Thunder is incredibly powerful. The Garuda also brings the thunder and the lightning. Now, Richard Gere is a Buddhist, practicing Buddhist, sends out solicitation letters all the time for the Dalai Lama. When he was in Chicago, he used 108 times to practice every single step to teach himself tap dancing, or to learn the tap dancing that the choreographers were teaching him. So I don't think that this is a mistake here, the Garuda. So again, it's the harbinger. Some people said that the Mothman was seen on top of the bridge just prior to it collapsing. That's a factoid that we're never going to know for sure.
No way to know.
I will say, though, that prior to the Chernobyl disaster, prior to 9/11 and some other disasters, people purported to see a Mothman-like being or a Garuda. Now, notice this cover, also one of the first covers of Mothman Prophecies, if not the first one, an investigation into the mysterious American visit of the infamous feathery Garuda. So Keel was basically saying, it's right on the cover, that's what Mothman was. It was this Garuda. Okay, very striking.
He says it in the book, too.
Yeah. These are sketches, conceptualizations. Again, not that far off from a Garuda or a Thunderbird. Right? Of course, a little bit of the horror element and all that. Someone else sees it in Point Pleasant. That's the link. Clyde says, I want to talk to the person who drew this. My wife was drawing this. That's her sketchbook. You can see these sketches, these and a bunch more, in the Mothman Museum. So go ahead and go there. This is what Mary sees right before she has the car accident that leads her to the hospital, where they find out that she has the glioblastoma, right? The brain tumor. That's pretty classic Mothman.
Definitely.
Mothman is shown 6 times in the movie. One time, and it was too hard. It happened so quickly. He starts as that figure, and then he shrinks down into the silhouette of Injured Cold and comes walking towards Woody, or Gordon. So there's this overlap. You were saying that last night. Well, Mothman and Injured Cold are almost indistinguishable in the movie. Do you think that's true on that Injured Cold was a manifestation of Mothman?
Of the Mothman? No.
Okay.
No, I think whatever Injured Cold was, first of all, I only believe the original account of Woody Derenberger. I don't believe the subsequent accounts that he.
And none of our colleagues agree with that.
No.
So I want to say.
No, but that's
right. But that's our feeling.
That's my take on it. And whatever that was, I do believe he saw whatever the stovepipe, craft that came down in the middle of the road. It was part of the larger phenomenon of the UFO flap and everything, whatever it was, whether a portal opened up or whatever was going on, but it was part of that, but not, I don't think Injured Cold was at all connected to Mothman, but that's just what I know.
So we found a hidden gem, and it was hard to find, and we had to go frame by frame, but we're going to show it to you, and then you can go find it yourself. Mothman is seen 6 times in the movie. The 6th time is on the bridge. A cable breaks loose, and it goes through a windshield. And right before it strikes the windshield and ostensibly kills the person who's on the other side of the windshield, there's this. And I left it in the TV. I didn't bring it up real big. I just wanted to show you that. And as I was playing with it today and staring at it and looking at it, it's tell your description that you're telling me, because I think it's great.
I think to create the image, it looks to me like what they did was took a photograph of a man's face and overlaid some sort of moth-like filter over top of it, and it's just a really cool effect.
And that's the overlap between Injured Cold and Mothman that they're selling in the movie. Yeah. Well, as I was doing it today, and I'm just going to go real quickly through it, but it kind of, this is what I saw in 2009 that we found from regression hypnosis, and it's just kind of weird. Just a little weird. It was just striking to me because this kind of looks like the nose of the thing, and I know the eyes are very different, so it's just the composition. That's all.
Yeah,
composition.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that
it's kind of a synchronicity because
it's weird.
That's what we saw in Point Pleasant, or you saw. I didn't see that in Point Pleasant, but you saw it, and
right.
And then something similar is in the movie. I get what you're saying.
So, one of the things that has been pretty thoroughly debunked, but it was pretty strong for a long time, and some people still do believe it, is the idea of Cornstalk's curse. So again, we've done 2 or 3 episodes now on Point Pleasant. You can go back and watch those. But there was the Battle of Point Pleasant during Lord Dunmore's War. It was a dispute between the governors of Virginia and Pennsylvania, as well as the Native Americans, the indigenous people, several tribes, for claims of the land where the Ohio and the Kanawha met. The French had claimed it and then gone away years before. There's a big plaque there that they would have to put in the ground to claim something and explore. I think that was maybe in the 1740s, if I'm correct. But they say that Cornstalk, he was ultimately killed. He was murdered at Fort Randolph. That before he died, he spoke a curse. Now, that it would be cursed for 100 years. Or some people say 200 years. But they broke in, they killed him. He didn't have time to say anything. He did not have
time to, nor do I think he would have.
Right. Great point.
I don't think he would have done it. He certainly didn't have time. And yeah, he was executed in cold blood.
So there's an obelisk monument to him in 2 Indy Way Park. Kind of problem with that is that is about 7 feet tall and about 70 or 80 feet tall or whatever. Is the monument to the Battle of Point Pleasant, and using words like savages and yay us white people banished. So a moment in time, those are difficult things. I do historical education. It's tough stuff. It's tough stuff. They just dug up. They took out that Robert E. Lee statue, found the time capsule and all that complicated things. So there's 2 things. This is one of them. He's in a shop, and sitting on the counter is this very weird, black-shaped, vaguely Mothman thing.
Yeah, we really tried hard. We could
it says WeBig.com. I'm almost positive when you look at it. Yeah, if I make it big, pretty much says WeBig.com. We couldn't figure out what the heck that is. So, and right next to it, the Native American with the eagle. There's also, when Gordon has the premonition confirmed on the TV, they're in a diner about the plane crash. There is a mural, which is an Indian scene, Native American scene. So those are little encodements in the movie, although the curse is never mentioned. Okay, so the town and the bridge. This was shot in Katanning Point, Pennsylvania. This is a shot of the town for 2 reasons. One, Point Pleasant's very small. It couldn't accommodate the cast and crew to make a major motion picture. Also, the bridge needs to be closed down for 2 months, and Point Pleasant simply economically could not afford to do that. Point Pleasant, prior to the movie being released and the birth of the festival and all, was a dying town. It was almost dead. Now it's thriving. We've talked about that. So that's Katanning, New York, and that's Point Pleasant.
No, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. Sorry. Katanning, Pennsylvania, and Point Pleasant, West Virginia. They did a beautiful job.
Yeah.
And I love this is a beautiful centerpiece from a filmic point of view, and you have the mountains behind it. It's very beautiful. A lot of people were very upset that it wasn't filmed in Point Pleasant, but there's so many practical considerations when you're making a major motion picture. There really are. Huge logistics, huge. So, okay, so let's so the bridge collapsed at rush hour, December 15th, 1967. In the movie, for dramatic purposes, it's Christmas Eve. Okay, that's forgivable. I like that. The lights are malfunctioning. Just prior to all of that happening, they light the lights at the town hall, right? So Katanning's town hall. But they shoot it in such a way that it kind of looks like you and I were talking about Washington, D.C. At the moment that the bridge collapsed, LBJ had just lit the Christmas tree on the White House lawn, or in the White House, which is very chilling. My first play, that's when it opens up at that moment. Now, Keel is at home in New York. He wasn't in town at the time, and he's watching the tree lighting. Part of the reason that he might have been watching the tree lighting is prior to the event, a man in black had told him that when LBJ lit the Christmas tree, the entire country's lights were going to go out. See, that's that trickster element again. You give information that's wrong information, wrong context. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or was it meant to be a metaphor? I mean, you know, because then all of a sudden it's on the news and so many people are seeing about this horrible tragedy. So,
Right.
I mean, that metaphorically would put your lights out.
Yeah, cool. Nice.
Just saying, it could
Yeah.
be.
No, that's a good thought. So here's the bridge post-collapse. The whole thing went down in a little over a minute.
Yeah.
So this was called an I-bar suspension bridge. I think there were only 4 of them in the country. A couple of them were already out of commission. It was done because of costs. There are suspension bridges that use steel cable that were proven, but they were more expensive. And this is, again, where this becomes really, really complicated. And we're gonna get into this as we're winding down here. So here's the scale model. It was a 1/6 model. It took 7 people 3 months to make it working full time. 20,000 pieces of steel. This scene is amazing. If you stop it, if you go frame to frame, you can see, if you go to the museum, you can see the pieces of styrofoam pavement, bridge pieces that come off, all of that kind of stuff. One of the big lights from the bridge, all of that kind of thing. I do know, and I'm going to leave her nameless, but someone who lost people on the bridge got up just prior, at the movie premiere, got up just prior to this scene and left. Totally understandable. It's very, very chilling.
Oh, yeah, I could completely understand that. Yeah.
An interesting thing is that Pellington makes it 36 people, not 46. I read a disturbing interview with him yesterday because there's another element that's very disturbing to me. He thought that 46 was too many deaths. Well, hey, pal. It really happened. There's no thing as too many.
What happened?
Right. Yeah. I mean, one too many is too many in a preventable tragedy. Now, with the I-bar, there was a stress fracture and it was covered, so you couldn't see it. But the engineering didn't account for increased traffic, bigger trucks. Bridge went into operation 40 years earlier, in the 1920s. So you didn't have giant over the road. I know a guy who drove 18-wheelers, and he went over that bridge earlier in the day. So you have the lights malfunctioning, which puts a huge load on the bridge. A lot of things came together. And I think you're right. A big signal had to go out to open a portal to generate Mothman and MIBs, UFOs, injured cold, the whole 9 yards. There was a big, in the space-time fabric, there was some kind of signal there. Who knows how long the crack had been there, but just those lights malfunctioning, it would have collapsed eventually. But it happened that night.
And right before Christmas, just after so many people had been stressed dealing with these strange phenomenon, these strange men in black, these Mothmans, all of this, the town's already stressed. There's already, and then they're dealing with this.
And 13 months to the day from the Mallet Scarberry sighting. That number 13, make of that. So the 36 Pellington says he chose because it was his dad's football jersey number. Okay, so wake up number 37. This was an interesting thing. We had never noticed this before. So you see on the radio, there's the out channel 9 and channel 19. Well, it's on channel 19, and all of a sudden, as the bridge starts to collapse, it spontaneously in Connie's Bronco flips to 37. interesting little tidbit.
Mhm.
Nice little thing. Look for that next time you go. So here's my biggest problem with the movie that I've had for a really long time. The ultimate cause of the collapse of the Silver Bridge was never determined. That's a lie. It was
Yeah,
a year
I wish-
after.
Yeah, I don't know why he did that. I really wish he would have
Yeah. Now,
stated the truth.
I've spoken to some people about it, and they said, well, it's a movie, it's fictional. It is a parallel universe. It's based on a true story. And this allows the mystery to remain. But I'm sorry. I'm just going to call it like I see it. I find it disrespectful. The bridge collapsed because it was an inferior design designed to cut costs.
Yeah, that's one thing with, I mean, I think the movie's brilliantly done. They do such a good job of interweaving all the different elements, the weird phenomenon, and making them into a cohesive story. They do a beautiful job of that. But I do feel like the actual loss of life is whitewashed.
Right.
That's the word I was looking
for. Yeah, by changing the numbers.
Yeah, changing the numbers and not really, the focus isn't on that as much.
So we want to help to remedy that. So let's have a moment of silence here. Radio to Earth Radio, Patriot Radio, who's ever listening to this. What we have here is the Silver Bridge Collapse Memorial Plaque, constructed in 1928, connected Point Pleasant and Canoga, Ohio. Name credited to aluminum-colored paint used. First eyebrush suspension bridge of its type in the U.S. Rush hour collapse on 15 December 1967 resulted in 31 vehicles falling into the river, killing 46 and injuring 9. Failed eye-bar joint and weld identified as cause resulted in congressional passage of National Bridge Inspection Standards in 1968. So there you go. So we have a picture from one of the very first times that we went to this memorial plaque that's right on the site where the river was, and one just when we went, but just this past November. And it needs a good sandblasting. It needs to be cleaned up if you look at the difference. So if anybody from Pleasant's listening, I think they deserve that. But it's amazing how the bushes have grown up as we have grown up. So quick moment of silence. Okay, thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Couple of quick tidbits here. 6:14 is on the clock in one of the scenes, and that's actually from John Keel. John 6:14 in the Bible. This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world. That's a very, very cool little Easter egg insider kind of thing. Also, there's a scene. They're kind of like the Mallets or the Scarberries. There's a young couple. They're fooling around in the back of their car, but she says, we're getting engaged. They see this Mothman injured cold kind of thing, and he gets what's called Klieg conjunctivitis. This is true from the cases. Red, swelled, and swollen eyes, like radiation birds. Keel got it after seeing a UFO. Also, one witness bled from the ear after seeing Mothman, and Gordon, in one scene, he comes out of the hardware store and his ear is bleeding. So they kind of shoehorn that in. So I just want to say, if you want to see props and all of that kind of thing, go to the world's only Mothman Museum. Jeff Wamsley has done this thing right. It's going on 20 years. There's tours. I'm very excited, of course, to be doing the escape room, which is going to be right upstairs. We are totally honoring the memories. Jeff does a wonderful job. You can see all the different things there, different homages. So that's what we have.
That's what we have. Thank you for this was all Joey, folks. He did the research on the interviews and put the slideshow together. I just enjoyed the movie and reading the book.
Well, no, but we've been on this journey for 12 years, and but with the play, the escape room, the old play, and a book I'm writing, Mothman and Me, that is going to come out in 2 years. It's good to know all this stuff. Keep building it. Get the story out there. Craig says, I really like the slideshow. This is a great up-leveling that StreamYard has done. So here we are. Thank you all. I know some
Thank
people
you,
don't like us
everyone.
being so small for so low, but I think so. Thank you all. Yes. Mary, I'm so glad you could join us. I knew you were excited about this. I hope we
Yes,
did it
thank
justice. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Whatever you do, please stay safe and have fun.
Yeah, who knows what 2022 is going to yield, but I know on this show, great things, great collaborators. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you,
and to our
guys.
upcoming collaborators that we're going to announce, Brian, Emily, and Devin. Thank you. We're pushing 100 episodes, and we're going to come out. We're going to keep pushing hard. We're going to keep uncovering the truth, try to counter the tricksters and the great gatekeepers. I'm just going to throw some of these messages up there. So thanks for staying with
Lori.
us, and we'll see you all soon. Join us next week when we go into the outer realms,
where the paranormal and the supernatural
are just the normal and the natural condition of the planet. Good night, all.
We're not allowed to know.
Take care.
Bye, guys.